Howdy, and welcome to my guide to Twilight Imperium strategy cards. So the strategy phase is a key phase to the game of Twilight Imperium, and it's one where many beginners don't really think too much about it. But as you gain more experience into the wonderful game that is Twilight Imperium, you start thinking about these strategy cards a bit more, and that can impact your decision with regards to which strategy card you choose each round. Now, in basic principle, there are three main factors which determine the strategy card you will choose each round. One's super obvious. And the second point is, it's pretty obvious. And then the third is a bit more subtle. Having knowledge of all three of these will better allow you to choose the right strategy card each round. So with that said, let's jump right in. So the first consideration, the most obvious, and it's the one that's going to be the main influential factor in choosing your strategy card, is the primary ability. I mean, this is obvious. Any new player, any beginner player to the game will choose their strategy card solely based on the primary ability. Do you want the ability to research 2 technology in a turn? Do you want the flexibility which warfare can offer you? Do you want to take the speaker? Do you want to construct? Stuff like this. The second point to consider is the initiative number. And this is something that, beginner players won't really take this into consideration, but after you've played a few games of Twilight Imperium, you start thinking more about the initiative number. And there's a couple of considerations that I want you to bear in mind that will influence your decision based on initiative number. And there are some cases where you may, or I certainly have, chosen a strategy card for its initiative number primarily, rather than for the ability that the strategy card would give me. And there's a few reasons why you would want to do this. Number one is maybe you want to get the jump on someone. You're planning on attacking a certain player as your first action in the action phase. And perhaps that player has already chosen their strategy card. In this scenario, you would then pick a strategy card with lower initiative so that you could get your first turn before them and you could attack them immediately. On the opposite end of the scale is that maybe you like to hang back. You like to, and this is kind of what I like to do as well, sort of hang back and see how everyone else's turns play out. And with the hope that everyone passes and you're the last active player. In which case, you would choose a strategy card with a high initiative number. One of these, for example. And that will allow you to, be further up in the initiative number so that you can react to what other people do. This is generally what I prefer. And as my main race is the Embers of Moor, and with them, I generally want to be taking, warfare or technology quite a lot anyway. So this fits into my playstyle. Now the third consideration, and this is why I've arranged the strategy cards in this weird order, is to do with timings. So there's 2 strategy cards which are notorious for other players to try and work around to make the most of. And that is construction and warfare. So the first one is construction. Most people, or those who are experienced in Twilight Imperium, will often pop construction on their very first action, such that anyone who chooses an initiative number greater than 4, if they wish to use the secondary of construction, they will have to lock down a system before they've had the chance to move any units out. So the first bracket is initiative numbers 1 to 3, these 3 here. As these allow you to act before construction, and therefore you can move a fleet out. If you're planning on using the secondary of construction, you can move a fleet out, and when construction's popped, you can then spend the secondary to then lock down an empty system. And on the other end of the scale, we have the high end, warfare. So people who choose warfare generally like to try and stall it out, especially on the very first turn. And one of the best ways to prevent yourself from being stalled out is to choose an initiative number that is higher than warfare. Leadership is an exception to that rule, however, because with leadership you gain extra command tokens, and so with this you can actually burn a command token or 2 if you really need to in order to stall into the secondary of warfare in order to build on home and then move out in the same turn. So that's why I put leadership here, because it actually fulfills both the requirements of undercutting construction and stalling into the secondary of warfare. And with trade, the reason I put trade with leadership is a hard sort of count, is a hard, like a almost guaranteed way of fulfilling both requirements here. Whereas trade is a soft sort of method in which you can try and negotiate with the construction and warfare players to maybe refresh their commodities if you can ask them to hold back a turn of construction or play the warfare quicker. In order to leverage the timing of these, you can offer to refresh the commodities. Obviously, this is not guaranteed to work, and in many cases, it depends who holds these strategy cards. If it's a race that only has 2 commodities, you're pretty much out of luck. However, if the race has 3 or 4 commodities, or heck, even if it's like a Hakan, the Hakan refresh anyway, never mind. If it's a 3 or 4 commodity race, odds are a bit more in your favor, but it's not guaranteed, and it may just be the case that the person who's picked warfare or construction wants to just screw you over anyway. So it's not guaranteed. Whereas leadership pretty much is. So those are the 3 main reasons to consider initiative number when choosing your strategy card. You either want to undercut someone to attack, you either want to be back in the pecking order so that you can react to what other people do, or you choose an initiative number such that you can undercut the construction or stall into warfare. Now, the final and third consideration for choosing a strategy card, and one that is overlooked even by experienced players, this is under the radar, and this third factor is especially prominent if you are last in the choosing order of strategy cards. And that third factor is, wait for it, to deny the rest of the table the secondaries of the unchosen strategy cards. Now, I want to go on a small tangent with politics. With politics, if you choose politics and you take the speaker, it's a very common strategy to try and sell the token to the player on your right, such that you would go from being first to choose the strategy cards in the next round to second, whereas the person on your right would go from picking last to picking first, which is a big deal. However, Sometimes you can't negotiate with the player on your right. Maybe you haven't become neighbors with them, or they just don't want to deal with you. The other consideration, which is often overlooked, is to sell the speaker to the person on your left. Now, this means you sacrifice the ability to pick first and you make yourself pick last instead. And 9 times out of 10, or most of the time, picking last is not good. You don't want to be picking last. There are very few circumstances where picking last is a good thing, or where you can circumvent the drawbacks of picking last. And that is when you are in a strong position, so you do not particularly mind which strategy card you end up getting, or you intend to pick a strategy card which is not a popular pick, and you believe no one else will pick it beforehand. Diplomacy is a classic example, except towards the end of the game. But in the early to mid game, diplomacy is a classic example of this. It's not a popular strategy card to be picked. And if for whatever reason you want to take diplomacy for a turn, then yeah, you could consider selling the speaker to the left. There is a hidden power of picking last. And if you do sell the speaker to your left, you can demand quite a lot for it. I'm talking like 3 to 4 trade goods, that sort of thing. If you sell it to the right, maybe 1 to 2 trade goods. Maybe 2 to 3 maybe, 1 to 3, I don't know. But if you sell it to your left, you're picking from first to last, and that's a huge deal. People should respect this, and you have a lot of leverage to ask for, 3 to 4 trade goods, or someone's trade agreement, or something of this nature. But yes, the hidden power of picking last is that you have the final say in choosing which strategy cards you deny at the table, which secondary abilities you deny at the table. So let's just take an example. 6-player game, let's just say Warfare, Imperial, Trade. I'll leave them up here actually, I'm not sure what the camera angle is. These 3 are picked. Say Politics is picked as well. One more, and Tech. We'll say these 5 have already been picked. And you're left with choosing Construction, Diplomacy, or Leadership. And this can happen. Like in the mid-game, this could very much be reality. This is not unheard of to have these 3 strategy cards, left for the final player to pick. And now, the final player has a couple of considerations to bear in mind. Often the pick would be Leadership. This is in this situation. I mean, it obviously depends on the board state, but most times you're going to pick Leadership in this situation. However, you examine the board, you notice that you've actually been managing your command counter economy quite well, whereas other players are struggling a little bit. Not too much, but you've got enough. You're okay. You're okay for this round if you don't pick Leadership. And then you look at the board state. You're planning on maybe attacking a player this round, but you don't want them to have the ability to fortify themselves with a PDS beforehand. So you're not planning on attacking them straight away, per se. So you do want to play your strategy card first and wait for as long as you can before you launch this attack, just to see if any other developments happen on the board. And because of this, you don't want to take Construction, because if you flip Construction, they have a chance to put a PDS and better defend themselves, so you don't want to do that. So in this situation, although you would maybe prefer the primary of Leadership or the primary of Construction, you pick Diplomacy because it has the least impact on your plans with regards to attacking this person. And you want to sort of starve the other players out of command counters because you've managed your economy well. So it becomes less about which primary ability you want, less about where you are in the pecking order in terms of initiative number, and more about what secondary abilities can you deny the rest of the table. And this is what, real experts at Twilight Imperium sort of grasp this concept. Especially when you're picking last. When you're picking further down the order, you have a better chance of... Obviously last is guaranteed, but you usually pick second last, and let's just say there's 4 left. Then you know for a fact that out of these 4, 2 of them aren't going to be picked. So you have a good idea of there's 2 that you wanted to deny the table anyway, so you don't pick one of the 2 and you pick the tech instead because whatever. But yeah, this is the third factor, and it's one that's not obvious. It's not obvious. It's not really something you think about, especially as a beginner player. It's after many games of Twilight Imperium have I started thinking about this a little bit more, and on a couple of occasions applied this to my games. Like 90% of the time, you're going to choose your strategy card because of the primary ability. That's just the way. As a beginner player, even as an advanced player, it's just the way the game goes. Sometimes you will choose the initiative number will influence your decision, especially on the very last turn, because obviously at the end of the game, you score objectives in initiative order, and as soon as someone reaches the threshold, the required number of points to win, the game ends immediately. So especially on what you believe will be the last turn, you'll want to pick the lowest initiative number first, assuming you don't need Imperial to reach that threshold. Barring that very last turn, however, you may want to consider picking initiative number to undercut someone, to stall into warfare, that sort of thing. And then the final consideration is denying the table of potential secondaries. Okay, and that's it for the strategy phase and dealing with strategy cards. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Mission complete. Signing out.